So getting back into our coverage over the Dawn of X era of X-Men comics, we actually pick up with Hellions number 2, 3, and 4. Now remember, this team was put together by Mr. Sinister, and the reason why, because most of this team is basically crazy, except Havoc and Psylocke. Psylocke was put on this team as a way to watch over this team to make sure they stay in line. But Havoc, something's going on in his mind to basically make him crazy. Now remember, to Mr. Sinister, the reason why he put this team together is because he's hoping that his own version of therapy could actually help these mutants out to make them better people. And so that is why he put this team together. Now, with that being said, the first place he sent them to was in Nebraska. And the reason why, because they're going to an old orphanage. Now, this old orphanage is very important for two different reasons. The first reason is because this orphanage was where Cyclops and Havoc used to stay at after they believed their parents were killed. And so, of course, they grew up in this orphanage. Now, the second reason why, because there is a laboratory underneath the orphanage. And of course, that laboratory belongs to Mr. Sinister. Now, the reason why this team is going to that laboratory is to shut it down, because apparently there is something going on in that laboratory. Now, in that laboratory, there are clones of the original Marauders. Now remember, back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, the Marauders were a team of bad mutants that worked under Mr. Sinister. But if they ever died, there was a clone backup ready to go to take that person's place. And so right now, it's Mr. Sinister saying, I need you to go to that lab and shut it down. Having clones of my old team just in there waiting to be released is very dangerous and could cause problems down the road. Now, Mr. Sinister knows that there is something else going on in that laboratory, but of course, he did not tell his new team of crazy people. Now, it doesn't take long for us to see that this team was not meant to be together, because as soon as they walk into the building and begin the process of looking for the entrance to the secret lab, that is the moment you have the nanny begin to act weird, where she wants to make sure that everybody is okay, and she's hugging people left and right, which of course does freak out a few people in the room. And that is the moment we come to find out the reason why she's acting like that is because a character known as Empath. Now, Empath has the ability to make people feel a certain kind of way. And so right now, he felt like playing a small game and making the nanny feel like she should take care of everyone in the room, which of course does freak out Grey Crow. And so when Grey Crow realized that it was Empath, Grey Crow shoots Empath in the head, which of course does kill him. Just like that. Bam. Grey Crow killed a team member. And for Psylocke, this is a problem because she is the team leader of this team. She must report this back over to Mr. Sinister. But while you have the team continue on to find the secret passageway to the laboratory, well, of course, that is the moment you have Havoc think that maybe he should not be on his team because he's not crazy like the rest of the team minus Psylocke. But that is the moment he sees his reflection, and when he does, his face looks different. And of course, something is behind him, around his neck, and it seems like some kind of demon or some kind of spirit is basically playing with his mind or trying to get into his mind. Now, when the Hellions arrive into the secret lab to find the clones, here comes the big problem though, because remember, their goal was to shut down the clones, to get rid of the clones before they come active, before they come alive. But when they find the clones are being hung up upside down. And of course, here comes the next big problem. They don't look alive. They look like zombies. That right there should not happen, of course. But of course, when the Hellions are trying to look around to hopefully find some clues on what in the world has happened in this laboratory, well, that is the moment we come to find out somebody behind them does some kind of spell. And when that person does that spell, of course, the clones come crashing down, get right back up. And yes, they are zombies, which means right now they're alive again and getting ready to attack the Marauders for whoever cast that spell. Now you do have Grey Crow actually try to talk to these clones, because Grey Crow was also a Marauder, but of course his clones are not in the room right now. These are clones of his teammates when he was a Marauder back in the 1980s, 90s, and the early 2000s. So these clones are just clones of his original teammates. And so he believes that if he's able to talk to them and actually calm them down so that they can have a conversation and learn what in the world has happened to them, well, that is the moment you have these clones tell the Hellions that right now they're being controlled and being led by no other than Madilyn Prior. Now, Madilyn Prior goes way back in X-Men comics. I mean like 1980s. Because the reason why, when Jean Grey died at the end of the Dark Phoenix saga, Cyclops really just left the X-Men. But when he did leave the X-Men, he did run into someone who looked just like Jean Grey. And that was Madilyn Prior. Which of course Cyclops did fall in love with Madilyn Prior. But then over the years in Marvel Comics, we come to find out that Madilyn Prior was a clone of Jean Grey made by Mr. Sinister. So of course he knew that she was here in his laboratory. But getting back into her history, even though Cyclops and her were a couple and they actually got married and had a son, and that son was Cable, Cyclops began the process of kind of moving away from her and falling back in love with Jean Grey. And so of course with Madilyn Prior kind of feeling like she was being forgotten because Jean Grey was back in the picture, she began to hate Cyclops to the point she actually slept with Havoc, Cyclops' brother, and they build some form of a relationship. And so Havoc was really on Madilyn Prior's side because he believed that what his brother did was wrong. But things get even crazier because then Madilyn Prior made a deal with a couple demons and got some demonic powers. And so now she's known as the Goblin Queen. Now, of course, in Marvel Comics, she was dead for a small bit of time. But now the big question is, how in the world was she brought back to life if she never was on COPPA? That is the big question right now. But of course, when Havoc sees Madilyn Prior, he's kind of like, oh, Madilyn, it's you. Like he's still in love with her still. Now, of course, once everybody realized who's in charge of this whole situation, why everyone is here for, that is the moment we get a big battle between the Hellions versus the clones that are being controlled by Madilyn Prior. Now, with that being said, this battle is very interesting because the Hellions are not really a strong team. Most of their team was kind of like, Some of them were not good fighters. Their powers could help them, but not really. But either way though, you have Havoc not helping his team out. And the reason why, because when he saw Madilyn Prior, all those flashbacks that he had with her, being in love with her, being with her, and them building some kind of relationship, he's kind of like on her side automatically. He's not trying to help out his team. Instead, he wants to know, how did she come back to life? Because of course she was dead, but now she's back alive again. And of course she wasn't brought back to life thanks to COPPA. And so that means she was brought back to life in a different way. But the question is though, how? But either way, while Havoc is trying to figure out how Madilyn Prior is back and hoping that she'll take him back, the Hellions are getting beat left and right. And matter of fact, most of the team are taken hostage. Nanny, Maker, and also Grey Crow, they're all taken hostage left and right. because the clones were able to overpower them. Now Psylocke, she's still free, but she has to deal with another problem, which is Wildchild. Now, Wildchild is part of the Hellions, but here comes the big problem with Wildchild. Wildchild is a ripoff of Wolverine, but on top of that, his mind is more like an animal's mind, meaning that he's always looking for an alpha in a group. And so, of course, when he sees Psylocke, he's kind of like, I'm going to test you and see if you are an alpha, because if you are, then I will listen to your directions. But for right now, I am going to attack you. And so while the rest of the team has been taken hostage, you have Psylocke fighting against Wildchild, her own teammate. Now, when we jump over to Hellions number 3, we do pick up with Madilyn Prior and Havoc talking to one another. In reality, it's more of Madilyn Prior talking to Havoc. And matter of fact, she used her magic powers as a way to kind of take away Havoc's mouth so he is unable to talk. But with that being said though, you do have Madilyn Prior tell Havoc her origin story. It's not really her telling it to him, it's more of her telling it to us. Because if you're new to Marvel Comics, you may not know who in the world she is. And so of course, it was a way for us to learn her origin story. Now of course, you do have Havoc begin the process of cutting himself a new mouth, because again, Madilyn Prior took his mouth away. And so after making a new mouth and bleeding all over the place, you do have Havoc say he's tired of hearing about his brother. He's tired about hearing about the woman he loved who really loved his brother more than him. And so with that being said, is Havoc saying, I'm coming here to actually reclaim you. I want you back. I want you to be my girl. Now, of course, while he's saying those things, the speech bubble has changed, because it's not really Havoc talking normal. It seems like something else has taken over his mind once again. Now, of course, if you're wondering what happened to Psylocke, because the way we ended the second issue, the earlier chapter in this video, Psylocke was about to fight against Wildchild. But of course, Psylocke was injured thanks to her battle against the clones of the original Marauders team. And so right now she has to fight against a rip-off Wolverine in hoping to survive. Which of course, she's able to get some punches in, because Psylocke is a very well-trained fighter. And so fighting against someone like Wildchild, who honestly is not really a great fighter, he's more of just like a wild beast in a human's body, she's able to get a few hits in, and she's hoping that sooner or later he will realize that she is an alpha and he'll probably listen to her directions. Now, if you're wondering, why in the world is Madilyn Prior doing all of this for? Like, what's her end goal? And you have to remember that when it comes to Madilyn Prior, she was a clone of Jean Grey. I mean, she still is a clone of Jean Grey, but she was a clone that was made by Mr. Sinister, because Mr. Sinister found out if Cyclops and Jean Grey ever had a child, that child will become very powerful. And so of course he made Madilyn Prior a clone of Jean Grey for his own needs. And of course she did fall in love with Cyclops, they did have a child, and that child was Cable. Now of course she's upset with Mr. Sinister, she wants to kill him. Now her second reason is also the idea of Greycrow. Now Greycrow, who's part of the Hellions, was also part of the original Marauders team. But Greycrow was the one who shot her in the head, which of course killed her, and then he took her baby. And of course that baby was Cable, because to Mr. Sinister, again, he knew that if Cyclops and Jean Grey had a child, that child would be very powerful, and he wanted to use that child as a way to fight against Apocalypse. And so with all that being said, when Madilyn Prior gave birth to Cable, Greycrow came by, shot her in the head, took that baby, and gave that baby over to Mr. Sinister. And so that's now two reasons on why she's doing all of this for. But of course there is a third reason as well. She's very upset that no one cared that she was gone and no one noticed when she came back. She felt like once again that she was forgotten about. Just like when Cyclops forgotten about her when Jean Grey came back in the picture and he was all like, oh, Jean Grey is back. Bye, Madilyn. Sorry, I'm gone. And so once again, she feels like that she was forgotten. And so those three reasons right there is the reason why she's doing all of this for. Now, we knew that sooner or later, Psylocke was going to be able to take care of Wildchild, because even though their battle does go on for a tad bit, Psylocke is a well-trained fighter. I mean, Wildchild is a good fighter as well, but again, his mind is more like an animal's mind. And so he's not trying to fight like an actual fighter. He's fighting like more of an animal. And so Psylocke was able to take him down and show him that she is an alpha. And the way she did that, snapping his neck. Now, of course, when it comes to Wildchild, you have to remember he is a ripoff of Wolverine. And so, of course, he does have a healing factor. But with her being able to snap his neck is him realizing, okay, Psylocke is an alpha. It's time for me to listen to her and listen to her next directions. But getting back over to Madilyn Prior and Havoc, you do have Madilyn Prior express more feelings about how she feels about the idea that no one cared for her, how no one came to her, especially when she came back to life. And when she found out that COPPA was made a brand new mutant island, a mutant nation, and she was not invited or anybody tried to look for her to see that if she wanted to come, she was really upset. And so really it feels like this is going to lead into a big war between Madilyn Prior and COPPA, because it's her saying like, no one came for me, no one tried to help me, and so I am going to bring that entire mutant nation down. No one even thought to come look for me. Now, we do pick up with Psylocke and Wildchild one more time. And of course, this is the moment where you really have the book tell us that Wildchild does look at Psylocke as an alpha, and he is going to listen to her from now on and basically do everything she wants him to do. And right now, their goal is to save the rest of their teammates that are still alive. The reason why I say still alive is because, remember, Empath is dead. But of course, it's Psylocke and Wildchild about to get the job done. But getting into the last issue we're going to cover in this book, we actually pick up with Madilyn Prior right now, doing some kind of ritual on Havoc, where of course she does speak in a way by telling us that her main goal or her end goal right now in this current storyline is to bring demons to Earth, or to hopefully have the demons replace the clones, or have the demons use the clone bodies as a way to walk on the planet Earth. But of course, it's her saying she's going to bring hell on Earth. And Havoc is right now about to become the main point of her ritual. And Havoc, he's down. But again, this is not our Havoc. I mean, it is our Havoc. But what I'm saying is right now, the way he is talking, it does seem like there is some kind of demon or whatever has taken over his body, and to make him so down to help Madilyn Prior actually reach that goal to bring hell on Earth. Now, with this book being the last chapter of this storyline, a lot of things do begin the process of winding down. My prime example is when you have Psylocke and Wildchild being able to actually save the rest of their teammates from the clones that are being controlled by Madilyn Prior. Now, once you have Psylocke and Wildchild do that, you didn't have Grey Crow tell his teammates he needs a moment alone. And the reason why he asked for that is because he begins the process of shooting off every single clone that was left behind in this laboratory. And that was really hard for Grey Crow to do, because these clones are not just clones of him, but they're also clones of his old teammates. So even though they're just clones, they still look and talk like his old teammates. And so with that, it was so hard for him to go ahead and kill every single clone off. Because remember, their first mission was to come here and to basically shut down this laboratory and the clones in this laboratory. But now their next goal is to hopefully save Havoc from Madilyn Prior. And speaking of Havoc and Madilyn Prior, you do have Madilyn Prior realize that the Havoc she has in front of her is not her Havoc. And what I mean by that is, yes, it is the Havoc we have seen throughout this whole storyline, but the way Havoc has been acting, the way he has been talking, it's not the Havoc that she knew a long time ago, the one that she was kinda in love with. And so she's kind of like, your mind is wounded, your mind is different, it's like something is wrong with you. And I know it's not me. And so the question is, though, what is wrong with you? But before she's able to finally learn what is wrong with him, well, that is the moment she is sniped by Grey Crow. Now, with her being sniped by Grey Crow, of course, that means that Madilyn Prior is dead once again. But before she dies off in the arms of Havoc, she does tell Havoc the only thing she wanted in life was to show the world that she was a real girl, a real woman. Because again, she is a clone of Jean Grey, but she hated the idea that that was she was known for, that she was only known for as the clone of Jean Grey. She wanted to be known as Madilyn Prior, a real woman. Now, of course, with the death of Madilyn Prior, you have Alex, aka Havoc, just let loose. He's angry. He's upset that the woman he loved has now died again a second time. And so with that, he's just full of rage. He is angry at the world. He's angry at himself. And so with that, he just let his powers go all out. And with that being said, he begins the process of bringing down the entire laboratory, the entire orphanage. Everything is about to be wiped out completely. But with that being said, once the team is able to get outside of the building, and after Havoc has brought down the entire building, you have Havoc just left. But you didn't have the rest of the team, minus Psylocke, kind of look at Havoc as, yeah, it does seem like he is a tad bit crazy, a tad bit wild. And so honestly, he'll fit perfectly right in with this team. And honestly, this team could go somewhere in the far future. But here comes the big thing though. You do have Cyclops and Havoc have a conversation. And we come to find out, Havoc had asked Cyclops to talk to the Quiet Council in the idea of bringing Madilyn Prior back to life. And you have Cyclops tell Havoc the Quiet Council said no. And that right there, it hurts Havoc so much. Because Havoc's all like, she was real. Even though she was a clone, she was real. And so why can they not bring her back to life? But again, you have Cyclops say, because she is a clone of Jean Grey. With her being a clone of Jean Grey, they're not allowed to bring her back to life. And that is why, Alex. And of course, you have Alex yell at his brother saying, she was real. And brother, what do you want? And you have Scott Summers walk away. And this is Marvel basically telling us that Cyclops still loves Madilyn Prior, even though he's with Jean Grey. But he still has some kind of love for her. Now we do see that Mr. Sinister was watching Cyclops and Havoc have their conversation, and honestly, he was enjoying their suffering. Their suffering was all done once again by Madilyn Prior, a clone that Mr. Sinister made. But either way though, while he's enjoying their suffering, that is the moment you have the nanny arrive. Had a hard time saying that, arrive. But either way, once she does, the nanny tells Mr. Sinister later that she will come back to him and she will do a lot of bad things to him sooner or later for everything he has done. Not just the Cyclops and Havoc, but the possibility of other people in the world who had grew up in an orphanage. And so this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. But in reality, the next storyline for the Hellions is of course X of Swords, which we're going to cover very soon down the road. But with that being said, I do hope you enjoy today's comic book video. So with that being said, I'll see you guys next time. Later.